Hey there, it's Robin, and you're listening to the Healthy Habits for Midlife Mamas. This podcast is all about you, your health, your wellness, and making those 1% shifts that can transform your life one step at a time. Here, we're going to explore simple, holistic strategies to help you thrive and not just survive in this beautiful midlife chapter. From whole foods and movement to mindset shifts and spiritual grounding, I'm going to guide you through all of it so that you can feel your best inside and out. If you are ready to reclaim your energy and make wellness a priority, you're in the right place. And if you're loving what you hear, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps me and you to reach more women just like us. Now, let's dive in and see what we can find. Hey, welcome back. I'm really excited to have on Amy Spindel, who is the creator and founder of Food with Thought Nutrition. She dives into gut health, which you guys know I am a huge advocate on the gut-brain connection. I really believe that it is something that is coming to the forefront in the science world, but I'm really excited to be living in a time where we actually have more information and can utilize it for better health and wellness. So welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
I would just love to start by hearing a little bit about your story, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. It's always a journey to get where you are, right? I see a ton of books behind you, which is like, I love it. It's like my passion. I'm like, oh, which book can I read?
Thanks. It's mine too. I just love having all these resources. My journey has been a long and twisty one, and maybe some of your audience can relate, but I actually started out not in this field, but as a social worker and pretty quickly burned out. Average life of a social worker and therapist is 6 years, and I hit the 6-year mark and was just kind of done. It was too much for me. And I had always thought it'd be really fun to make cakes, and I was ready to do something creative. So I went back to pastry school. And while I was at pastry school, really, really loved it. I was working as a pastry chef. I was living my best life, got pregnant, and my son was born. And he really opened up my eyes because he was allergic to gluten, dairy, soy, corn, eggs, strawberries, and citrus. And I was really committed to breastfeeding him, and it just wasn't going to work. So I was out of a job. But really committed to figuring out why his gut was such a wreck, because here I was thinking I was so healthy, eating a vegetarian diet and trying to clean up my act and use all whole foods, and something was a mismatch. So I had the opportunity to enroll in nutrition school and really dug in pretty hardcore to try to figure out what was going on. Ended up pulling in functional medicine to really understand what the gut is, how digestion works, and how it impacts the microbes that live in the gut, how we develop food reactions, how things like food reactions can impact our growth and development, because my son ended up failure to thrive. So that became the next question of, well, what was going on there? He wasn't sleeping at all. He would sleep maybe an hour or two. He was waking up like 4 to 8 times a night. It was not fun. But why was the gut creating these sleep disturbances? So was really able to dig in deeply and try to figure all this out for him. They say the best kind of investigator is a mom.
That's right. I was just about to say that. I was like, as soon as our kids come into this world, they teach us so much more than anybody could ever even remotely begin to explain what being a mom actually is. But I feel the very same thing. Like when something is up with your kids, maybe not all people are like this, but my personality is, let me figure. I've got to dig in. I have to understand. And just like you, my second daughter, she slept maybe like 45 minutes at a time.
Oof.
And, it was never really even brought to my attention, that it could be, there was so much missing, and I didn't understand until we got a little bit down the road. And then, in hindsight, looking back, I thought, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. She's not felt good. Her stomach was a wreck. Her brain was a wreck. It was like all of the things. And little by little, peeling back the layers, right? You start to find the answers if you continue to search, or at least that's what I found. But it's a continuous thing. It's not something that you just go to nutrition school and learn everything and then you're done. It's like, no, that's just like the first step.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what did you discover? I'm curious. What is happening within the microbiome? What did you kind of figure out through nutrition school first?
Yeah, just unpeeling things and finally looking at my own health. I was not as healthy as I thought I was.
Okay.
I found that my diet was not serving me. I wasn't getting enough protein. I wasn't getting enough nutrients, and I had a ton of inflammation. And I was so used to just moving through the day to day and not checking in with myself that it just wasn't on the top of my radar.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was a massive revelation for me. And he inherited all of that from me.
Yeah.
So,
Right. That was the genetic part. I do
yeah.
want to just talk really quick though about inflammation because I do feel like currently right now it's a big buzzword.
Hmm.
And I want people to understand like truly what inflammation is versus chronic inflammation. Do you have an explanation between the two that we could kind of start to sort through just so people could leave with a better understanding of that?
So, like you were saying, there's chronic inflammation, there's also more acute. And our bodies need a small level of inflammation in order to heal ourselves. So, if we get a cut, we want there to be a little bit of inflammation that shows up so that the body kicks into gear, the immune system does what it needs to do, prevents infection, heals up the wound, and we're good to go. But it's when the body can no longer turn off that acute response that it becomes chronic. And so the body, the immune system, the nervous system are just in high alert mode constantly, and it doesn't shut off. And there's just continual damage happening to various systems in the body, kind of depending on where the inflammation is going, where those weak spots are. Um, and believe it or not, I was shocked to find out that the gut is one of the highest inflammation promoting places, if not the, in the body for all of us, because depending on how the microbial balance is, it will kick off a ton of toxins. And if we are not pooping well, we're not clearing it, we're not breaking them down, we're absorbing them, based on what's going on in our body, we're going to get a ton of inflammation there that then goes into the brain. So, and then it circulates systemically too. So a lot of
Hmm.
people have tons of problems just coming out of the gut with the inflammation happening there.
Yeah. One of the things I hear a lot is, well, I'm not sick. I'm fine. I'm okay. I don't feel bad. And the only thing I just want to caution people, and again, just to give a picture analogy, it's like we all have a bowl inside of us, and that bowl can only hold so much. And picture a cereal bowl. And so, you know, we keep dumping stuff in this bowl, toxins and pesticides and chemicals and inflammatory foods and processed stuff. And everybody's bowl is a little bit different shaped, big, tall, whatever. And so some people's bowl being shallow can only handle a very little bit. They're just more sensitive. And then other people's bowls are bigger. And so you might not be sick now, you might not feel it now, but our body is kind of a machine. And so if we keep beating it up, eventually it's going to break down.
Seen some doctors do certain inflammation tests like CRP, C-reactive
Okay, that's
protein,
good.
but I've also seen the reference range for that increase over the years.
Okay.
So whereas it might have been, I can't remember what it used to be, maybe it was like 0 to 2, now it's like 0 to 10 is normal. And it's not that that amount of inflammation is okay, but it's just that this is what our population is looking like, so that they've normalized what our population is looking like, even though it's still
Mm,
present. So I
interesting.
think it's very interesting,
That is very interesting.
how the Western medicine is approaching this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It'll be an interesting next decade. I think a lot's going to change in the decade.
yeah.
I'm hopeful. So just going back to kind of your story, you went to nutrition school because you needed to do the deep dive. You needed to understand what was happening with your son. And that led you to then have to reflect back to yourself
Mhm.
and realize what wasn't happening within your body. And so once you started to shift your child's, surroundings and your own, what then changed for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So just within our own lives, cleaning up our diet even further, me becoming less reliant on only plant-based foods and
Hmm.
really starting to incorporate more animal proteins into my diet just to get those healing nutrients. And a big piece for me, it was such a shocking moment when I realized how jammed in fight or flight I was. Just being able to reclaim my nervous system and recognize that I was revved up all the time and start to intentionally slow it down made a massive difference in my healing. And it was funny because I was so used to digestive distress that it didn't really resonate for me as a symptom unless it was really dramatic in the moment.
Mm,
But as I was starting to improve my nervous system and starting to heal, I was starting to notice, yeah, this isn't normal. I have this kind of chronic underlying state of my tummy doesn't feel good. And
Mm.
that's not normal. And then I would notice periods where it actually felt okay and I didn't notice it anymore. And that really got me to recognize there's a disparity here. Something's not right. And
Mhm.
it was those little types of moments that really helped. I think me and my son noticing, okay, this kind of supplement might work. This kind of dietary pattern is working. This mindfulness exercise is working. What do we need to do to continue to build and to
Mhm.
make these
And
shifts?
I want to just mention really quick because what's coming to me by you saying all of this, and which is something that I wholeheartedly believe, it is not just the food on your plate. It is your lifestyle. It is all the things off your plate that feed you and nourish your soul. And that looks like um, lots of different things to different people. But some of the things that really we can all take a look at would be, um, our careers, our home environment, the products that we're using, spirituality, where you find joy, your relationships. If you're in toxic relationships with people, it makes it really hard to keep your nervous system in a state of rest or mostly in a state of rest. And you learn to live in that heightened state, right? When things are out of balance. And so I love that you address that, like what mindfulness active exercise is working. So with saying that, what were a few things that you noticed for you and or your son that helped you to regulate your nervous system
It
aside from
was
food?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and definitely taking out processed foods helped. But
Mm-hmm.
aside from that, working on microbiome balance and making sure that my gut felt like it was at a state of rest, so it wasn't constantly sending off alarm bells. Breathing activities, especially the first year or two as I was on this journey, were really, really helpful. And when I would start to notice myself revving up, just pausing for a moment, taking a few breaths to regulate again, and coming back into it. Um, Walking at that time was really important, just getting out in nature, even just going barefoot on my front lawn to go get the mail. It was a
Mm-hmm.
really quick trip, but just a moment of grounding and noticing what the grass felt like on my feet, and coming back into it. And found this really lovely mindfulness exercise on Insight Timer. That app I absolutely love, and I tell all my clients about it. But even to this day, there's one app where one track where if I can't sleep, I put that one on, and I really just apparently train my nervous system to respond to it and get me into a deeper sleep while it's playing. So that was a
Um,
nice find.
I love that. And one of the things, just by you saying that, it's so interesting when we have things, little practices that we put into place and our body really resonates with it. And for me, it was my yoga mat, which I wasn't even like a huge yoga person my whole life. When we kind of went in, I was like in and out. And when we went into COVID, I was like, well, I have nothing better to do. So now I got no excuse. I'm on my mat. But I will say, and I tell everybody this, my body knows immediately when I sit on my mat. I do my quiet time on my mat now. Like I do all my things that are super important on my mat because my body knows when it sits down on that particular mat for whatever reason, I just decompress. So just like, what you found that insight, what did you call it? Insight tracker?
Insight Timer.
Timer. Okay.
It's an app.
And that's
Yeah.
an app. Okay.
Hmm.
So Insight Timer. I'm definitely putting that in the show notes for everybody. But finding just one thing on there that really just your body could align with that could help bring down that heightened state. I just think that's what people should be looking for, right? They should be looking for the little clues of things, but sometimes you have to pause long enough to see it, right?
Exactly. And it's this finding a safe space and letting your body know that it can rest and be safe in that space.
Hmm.
And really just whatever that needs to be. Is it changing the music or the sound level? Is it changing the lighting? Is it finding a place to sit that feels safe? So whatever around you or what you're doing, creating that safe zone for yourself where your body can just be and not have to put defenses up, I think is really
Yeah.
important.
It is really important. And it's not something we've ever been taught, for most of us,
No.
majority of us. And I really feel like coming into like the midlife age range where, if you are a mom, you've been momming hard for 20 years plus, depending on how old your children are. And you're also now entering this stage of menopause, perimenopause, where your hormones are starting to go off a little bit. And there's so much change going on, and we've been so busy and conditioned to stay busy, to kind of be busy for the busyness of nothing, that we really have forgotten how to just take a step back and just rest and be calm and enjoy the nothing, right? It's like we have forgotten. It's almost scary to have nothing to do.
Mhm.
It's like a feeling of, well, anxiousness, like I have nothing to do. I mean, what can I do? How can I fill my time? And since turning 50, I've definitely shifted into like, where can I find more quiet time? Where can I find space by myself to process things? Because for so long, I think, again, you're just running, 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 and you're just not really in tune. So I think it's a lot of coming home to yourself internally when you kind of enter this stage. And also when your hormones are off and shifting, it affects everything. I do for myself, it affects my gut, it affects my brain. It has definitely taken a loop, and it's again stepping into something brand new and trying to figure it out. And so one of the things I know you talk about are like, 5 things to improve your digestion and your gut health. And I think for so many people, these 5 things could be life-changing because maybe they've never even thought about it before. So what are the 5 things that you feel are important to know?
Yeah, the number one thing I tell my clients that gets the biggest results that everyone can do at home for free is to just chew their food really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it sounds kind of funny, but
No, it's totally true.
that's the entry point to our whole digestive tract. And if we're not chewing our food well, we're not giving it the opportunity to fully break down. Um, and then, depending on what the microbial balance is in the gut, the microbes are either going to love that food and proliferate, and that could be a good or a bad thing, depending on what the food was, or they're not going to have so much access to it. And especially for people that have gastrointestinal things up in the small intestine, like a small bacterial overgrowth, chewing food is critical because otherwise you're just going to perpetuate that dynamic. So that would be my first tip for improving digestive and gut health. And then my second tip is to eat when you're not distracted or stressed out. So putting the phone away, not being in the car. I saw on Amazon, there's this tray table now that attaches to your steering wheel.
Are you
can sit
kidding?
Nope. Don't
That
get one of
sounds
those.
dangerous.
Save yourself money. Save yourself an accident. But really just being in a space where you can sit down and eat. And not just hovering at a counter, but sitting down and eating, even if it's for 5 minutes, the computer's shut off, you're not staring at a screen, you're not engrossed in a conversation that is difficult to hear. Something pleasurable is fine. Having lunch with friends is great. But anything that's going to be stressful or distract you from the art of eating is going to change how your food is breaking down. So if there's stress, your body's just going to shunt all that food right back out. It's not going to focus its attention on digesting and absorbing the nutrients that you're eating. It's going to be more focused on the stress response because your body doesn't know if there's a tiger chasing you or if you are in an argument while you're eating. So that would be something to consider. And I tell my clients, especially when they're really jammed in a stress response, sit down, look at your food, use your senses. What do you smell? What colors are on your plate? What are you most excited about eating? Get the saliva flowing a little bit just from that. And then maybe do a couple of deep breaths, maybe give some gratitude or say a prayer or a blessing over your food, and then have your first bite. And then you pull out your chewing. You're chewing really, really well. And just those 2 things alone can make a huge difference. My third tip is to really minimize and try to avoid as much as possible your processed food intake. So Mark Hyman called these edible food-like substances, whereas the rest of the world may call them food. I know, it's so funny, but it's so true, right? Like if it's not something that your grandma, your great-grandma, your great-great-grandma would recognize as a food, probably it shouldn't go in your mouth. So definitely things you can't read on the label, things that have been heavily processed and don't grow on a tree and you don't know where it really comes from, those are really going to wreck your gut. They're going to change the bacteria that are there. They could give you reflux. They're not going to break down well, and they're going to cost you a lot of nutrients to try to break them down and get them out.
Yep.
So that's my third. My fourth is to make sure that you are pooping daily. This is a huge one because when you're not pooping daily, you're not clearing out toxins and you're further feeding some of those pathogenic microbes that really shouldn't be there in big quantities. So we want to get the bowels moving first and foremost. And amazingly, all of the other steps can help with that because a lot of processed food maldigested food, eating while stressed out can cause constipation. So that may just clear up as you're trying these other steps. And finally, just thinking about getting as many plant-based foods into your diet as you can, as unprocessed as you can. And this can really help to feed the beneficial microbes and help with bowel motility and help to bring down inflammation and increase your nutrients and decrease symptoms overall. And of course, there's going to be, some of your listeners that say, well, I eat more fiber and I, get really bloated, I get really gassy, I get really distended, it's painful. I totally hear that. For these listeners, I think they need to get their guts checked out a little bit more and just get their microbiome assessed so they can tolerate the fibers a bit more, because that's a symptom and a sign and a white flag that something's off. We need to go in and investigate it more so you can feel better and eat all these foods.
I love it. And what I love most about these things are they're 1 through 4 is free.
Yeah.
So 5, yes, 5 definitely is something to, that does cost a little bit. But again, if you adjust what exactly you're buying, it's not as expensive to buy healthier food, even though it should never even be more expensive. And I have a real thing with that. But, I get like, I can't afford that. And so I like to walk people through, well, what is on your grocery list? Let's see what's there. What can we swap? And a lot of times it's just, again, putting intention with your goal and then what you're doing and matching them up. But one of the things, well, a few of the things, but the processed food situation. And I love Mark Hines, and I think his verbiage is pretty spot on. But one of the things I like to ask people is, if somebody gave you a poison and said, well, it's only poisonous if you ingest half of the bottle, but you should give your child just a little bit each day. Most people would be like, why would I do that? But we don't look at food like that. We look at, well, these are trusted brands. These are companies that have been around for a long time. And so my whole soapbox about that is you must know how to read your ingredients. I talk about it all the time. Okay. I don't know if things are healthy, just like you don't know if things are healthy, but I know how to read my ingredients. And so I teach that to people, how you have to become an ingredient detective. And you can't trust what the front says. You can't trust the company or the store because, number one, they might be uneducated, the stores, what they're purchasing. They think they're healthy. But number two, the people producing, they're looking for a bunch of loopholes because the cheaper they can make something, the more money they can make. And unfortunately, we live in a society that is money driven. So, two things that I tell people to start off by looking for is hydrogenated oils. Well, there's 3 things: hydrogenated oils, dyes, and high fructose corn. But yeah, high fructose corn syrup is another one.
Top on the list too.
that is, and then oh my gosh, the other one just flew out of my head. I say it all the time. Hydrogenated oils, dyes. Oh, it'll come back to me in an enterprise moment. Anyways, just by looking up those few things, okay, you can natural flavors. See, it came back to me. Natural flavors. Those 4 are really my top offenders to quickly locate on a label, on ingredients. If you see those are things that are not going to be feeding your body well. It's not going to feed your microbiome. It's going to add to inflammation. Dyes have, and there's tons of peer research data on it. Certain dyes create hyperactivity characteristics. My daughter was one of them, and that is how I learned about it. And it should be banned. It is banned in Europe, and so that's very aggravating that in the United States we are not banning it yet. I feel like we're making strides in that direction. So just by knowing 4 ingredients, you really can change the way in which you shop. And I think that's the first key and step to feeling empowered to make change.
Yeah, I love that because it really provides a lot of quick direction.
Correct. And then you make the decision ultimately, but at least you have good sourced information to make the best decision possible for you and or your children.
Exactly.
And when you say like eat what your grandmother made and all of that, what people also just need a little more education on is food is not the same food that it used to be.
Right.
Even back in the day when the first boxed food was made, it is not like the chip aisle today or the cookie aisle today or
Right. And
lots of other
grandma
things.
would recognize an apple, but grandma probably would have no idea what partially hydrogenated soybean oil is.
Right.
So,
And also the other thing I say is, do you have it in your cabinet? If you don't have it in your
right.
cabinet, I I wouldn't suggest putting it in your body. But again, that's just, and again, these things that we're talking about in the processed, arena, they do affect your gut health.
You
And
do.
again, depending on your bowl size will depend on when you start to break down. Um, and sometimes people don't recognize that their symptoms are related to the gut health.
Yes,
So,
this is
what
a
are
huge
some
one.
of the symptoms that you see in your practice when people come in, and maybe they're not really linking it to the gut?
Yeah, it really ranges the gamut. It might be headaches, it might be insomnia, depression and anxiety are huge ones. Um, it really could be anything, skin conditions, eczema, hives, urticaria, autoimmune conditions for sure, any of them, right? And there's over 100, 120 autoimmune conditions. So all of those are starting in the gut. Um, Sometimes pain syndromes, neuropathy. Um, so joint pain, it really ranges the whole gamut. And most times people do come in and they're like, well, this is hurting me in this part of my body, and then this is hurting me in this other part of my body. And I'm like, yeah, there is interconnectedness there. We can shift both of those at the same time. Let's stay in. But it tends to be some mind blowing because I think also just with our medical system, we're set up to see the neurologist and then the endocrinologist and then the gastroenterologist and then the therapist. And all of these people are really important for diagnosing for sure. They can help us know exactly what's going on. But deep down, a lot of the root cause of these problems is interrelated. And so the
Yeah.
solution is not all the specialists, but really just
Well, the
figuring out what's going
solution
on.
would be if all the specialists talked and everybody
That
knew
would be
what was
helpful.
happening with the
Yes.
patient. I think that's
Yes.
how the system could shift if because I do believe you're right. I do believe we need specialists for certain things to have that knowledge,
Yes.
but our body is not made up of all separate pieces. We
Right.
are a whole human. And so I think that's a big disconnect for people when they're trying to figure out their health. Well, I've already been to 82 doctors, and this guy said this, and this girl said this, and this person said this. And it's like,
It's
I'm
confusing.
burned out and it's
Yeah.
very confusing and it's overwhelming. And there's tons of noise about do this, do that. And I mean, I live in this world and it's still overwhelming for me when I'm trying to figure out something. And I'm just like, okay, shut it down and go internal because my body, I know, can tell me certain things. And so I think, again, we discount because we've kind of given our power to these other people who are supposed to be able to do everything and know everything. And they do to a certain extent, but they don't live in your body. They don't live in your life. They have no clue what your stress level is. They don't know what your home life is like. They just don't know all the things about you. And sometimes, just like you were speaking of, some of these issues are exacerbated by emotional states.
Hmm.
So when you're super stressed, when you are super anxious, when you are not really having that downtime, that does contribute to a lot of it. So if you've kind of exhausted all the pieces, I think people can definitely, again, go internal and see where am I not feeling well? Like, what am I eating? What am I doing?
Hmm.
What conversation have I just had? What environment was I just in? Those are things that we are the only ones that have the power to sort of investigate. And I think you'll be surprised, at least I was, to find out, oh, this keeps happening when I'm doing this. Let me not do this for a minute, 2 weeks, something, and then see how this is happening. And yeah, it's very
Yeah.
cool. It's a very cool experience that first time. It's like, oh, okay.
It is. I was having this like throat tightening and I would be getting pills caught in my throat. And I was like, what is going on? And it just created more panic. And then I realized I was so stressed out. And the only time it was happening was when I had gotten into a fight and I was feeling really stressed out. So just being able
Interesting.
to put that connection there really
Yeah.
just helped me to take a step back and start to address it. So just like you're saying,
Yeah. It's
it's
amazing. Our
funny.
body's
Yeah,
amazing. It really
it is.
is. The other thing I do want to dive into just a little bit is the gut-brain connection, because again, I think it's kind of a newer conversation for a lot of people, and nobody really relates the two. I think it's coming more into the mainstream. I will say that I do feel like there's conversation, but I don't think the conversation's loud enough quite yet. Um, and so when you are dealing with gut-brain connection, what are some of the things you have seen that offsets something from the gut to the brain or from the brain to the gut?
You mean like in terms of symptom reduction or?
Symptoms or what you've seen just medically, like when you test, like if you have a disturbed microbiome, what are you seeing in the brain? And then if, some of your neurotransmitters are off, if that's what you know, then when you're looking at the gut, what have you seen?
Okay, yeah, so let me just zoom out a second and just talk about the enteric nervous system because I think that's an important
Perfect.
framework for the conversation. So we have a second brain, which is in our gut, and it's called the enteric nervous system. And it's like this superhighway bundle of nerves that goes from all of our digestive organs. So the large and small intestines, the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder, the stomach, and it runs all the way up into the brain. And about 95% of the communications between this gut and brain connection come from the gut into the brain, which just tells us how much data is coming out of the gut and into the brain. And then only 5% come back from the brain to the gut. And depending on the types of communications that are happening along this superhighway of nerves, can help to determine mood, state, or anxiety. So if there's a lot of turmoil going on in the gut or we're anxious, we'll feel that in the gut, and then we'll also feel it as a mood state or an emotional state or an anxiety state. The other piece of this is that the nerve in particular called the vagus nerve that runs through and innervates all of these different organs and glands that coordinate all of the secretion, digestion, movement through the gut is very sensitive to different insults throughout the digestive tract. And by that, what I mean is depending on the microbiome, if we have a lot of pathogenic bacteria, they're kicking off different molecules that alarm the body. That's where we get the inflammation, the immune response from, that's sending off different messenger molecules like cytokines, other inflammatory molecules. And so these transmit 95% up to the brain, right? 95% of the communication up to the brain, say, hey, something's going on here. Brain, you need to use your intellect now and take a look at what's happening. So we get a lot of communication that way, just from the microbiome, telling us that something may be off or we're in a state of rest. And the other piece of it, like you had mentioned, neurotransmitters, is the bulk of our body's neurotransmitters are formed in the gut and communicate that they're present up into the brain so that the body knows to make them in the brain as well. It kind of mirrors that. So I believe it's about 95% of our serotonin, which is a happiness molecule, and also controls movement through the GI tract. And then I think about 65% of dopamine is produced in the gut. And dopamine is really like a reward kind of molecule, impulse, getting some gains from that kind of molecule. And so the bulk of that is produced in the gut, but then along this enteric nervous system line through the vagus nerve will tell the brain to start producing levels as well. So if it's low in production in the gut, it's probably low in production in the brain also. It's not that the molecules are moving, but just the instructions to fire and create more of those neurotransmitters are there. So those are all pieces that we need to be considering, especially if someone shows up with some kind of mental health diagnosis. I'm always looking at those pieces, looking at the microbiome, but also constipation. Constipation, not always, but can be related to an archaea, which is the type of bacteria. The science people are going to come after me. That's not 100% correct, but it's relatable. And basically it's called methanobrevibacter, and it produces methane gas in the gut, and it slows down motility. It slows down movement through the gut, and it suppresses production of serotonin, which then also contributes to slowing down movement through the gut. So we get this constipated scenario here, and the constipation decreases how well the vagus nerve can fire. It weakens the nerve. And so we start to get some damage, which then further reinforces slowing everything down. So that's another area that I look to and try to support people with. So as we're getting the bowels moving, because that is so important, looking at supporting the body and producing more serotonin, clearing out some of these opportunistic or pathogenic infections, but then also doing vagus nerve activities. So just like we would strengthen a muscle and do some exercises, we try to strengthen this nerve conduction and do
What
some
are your
exercises
top
there.
favorites exercises for strengthening?
So yeah, I tell some of my clients you can just go in the car, in the shower, and just belt out some music because
Yep.
singing can really help if you're loud or humming loudly. Giving hugs and cuddles is also another one, or petting your dog, things that really help to bring some joy. On the opposite side of that, for me anyway, is cold water plunges. So that also helps to get the vagus nerve firing a little bit better. Lots of different ways to do it.
I love that.
There's also now, they're not, well, yeah, I think one is a wearable. There's other devices though that you can attach to yourself and it sends some transmissions. I'm not quite
Hmm.
sure how they work that also help to stimulate the vagus nerve. So you put them
Interesting.
in
I
a
have not run
specific
into those
spot. And
yet. Yeah,
yeah, so that's
I'll have to look
another
that up.
tool that people can use too if what they're doing isn't working. That'd be
Yeah,
like
I have
level
to.
2.
Okay, I love that. And
Yeah,
again, just those the few little tips that she just gave for activating the vagus nerve are free, simple,
mhm,
and you can do them anywhere. So,
exactly.
if you take nothing away from today's episode, start singing in your car, your shower, and having some fun, finding joy. I think
Yes.
finding joy in things that are very simplistic are missing in a lot of people's worlds right now. Um, so I personally have had some experience with neurotransmitting testing and gut
Okay.
testing, but a lot of people probably listening have not. And so we're talking about all this stuff that could be happening in the gut with our microbiome and the dysbiosis and imbalanced and the neurotransmitters. And so one doesn't just walk into a doctor's office and someone say, "Oh, you have this, this, and this." How
Right.
would somebody know? What are the tests that people could start to learn about and understand if
Yeah,
this is
I
something that's resonating with them?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the test, but I'll also say too, it's not only about the testing, it's about doing a careful analysis of what people are eating,
Oh,
because
sure.
what people are eating is impacting the gut and the microbes that live there. And also just how they're living in their world. But
Hmm.
the tests that we tend to use for neurotransmitter testing, there are some tests that specifically only do neurotransmitters.
Hmm.
And then there's other tests like an organic acids test, which will look at
Hmm.
neurotransmitters, but also at the different nutrients and their utilization that can help to produce those neurotransmitters and how well the neurotransmitters are converting from one to another. So it's not that our body just produces one type of neurotransmitter, but that neurotransmitter then may undergo some chemical reactions and then become other neurotransmitters down the pathway before finally being broken down by the body and cleared out. So it will look for all of those things so we can get some inferences into where things might be going wrong, match it up with dietary pattern, also match that up with symptom history and see what's happening there. Because I've had it too where some people are just reporting a really depressed mood and it's not showing up on a neurotransmitter test. I'm not gonna say,
Sure.
oh, well, the test doesn't say that you have it, right?
Oh,
That's
right.
crazy. But we'll look at
Right.
other things too. And then in terms of microbiome testing, what I tend to do differently than most other functional practitioners is I'm using more shotgun sequencing, which is what we see in the clinical literature. And shotgun sequencing is a way of looking at the DNA in the stool and giving us a whole population of the microbes gained from that part of stool, usually coming from the lower part of the GI tract, lower part of the colon. But it really helps us to understand a little bit better about the ecosystem, the terrain that's going on there. So if I see a whole bunch of pathogenic microbes, I link back like, what do they have in common? What kinds of foods do they like to eat? Are they eating the same foods? Do they like the same type of pH? What am I inferring from there? I look at the beneficial bacteria, how much are represented in the gut? What kinds of anti-inflammatory molecules do these types of bacteria produce? And do you have any conditions that might be linked back to low types of these molecules? How can we tie that in? So I'm really trying to get a sense of what the ecosystem is like so we know how to then shift the diet, harness supplements if needed, get the nervous system back into control if we need to do that. Um, the other type of stool test outside of that is a PCR. That tends to be the more popular ones. And they tend to just look at a handful of microbes and see if they're high or low. I find this to be very much like conventional medicine, though, because we're trying to find one thing, we're trying to chase after it, change that
Hmm.
one marker.
Yep.
Can we kill it? Can we grow it? Okay, great, we're done. Whereas I'm finding this more ecosystem approach, it's called shotgun testing or metagenomic sequencing, is really giving better results because we're changing the environment. We're changing the environment inside the body, we're changing the environment outside the body. And it's going to be a lasting change because we're making lifestyle pattern changes, we're making dietary pattern changes. We're not just going after one little thing, but not changing what's around it that was maintaining that one little thing to thrive or to not thrive. We're trying to get
Hmm.
the body as a whole to thrive and bring everything up together into balance.
Into balance. Yeah. Yeah. Great. I love that. And I am very intrigued by the shotgun sequencing testing because I also too, like you, feel like sometimes some of these other testings are still departmentalizing. I think they're better information. For me, that first stool test that my daughter had, the picture was just incredibly amazing to me to see what was actually happening in there.
Yes.
And then studying her neurotransmitters and seeing how that was correlated and created. But you're saying the lifestyle on the outside, it is as equally, in my opinion, as equally important to be addressing it all slowly, 1% shifts at a time to create that lifestyle that's going to be lasting. So you don't clean it all up and go back right to it, so it's because that will happen, if you don't have the lifestyle plan in place and it's not something that aligns with you. And I think, again, we want someone to tell us like step by step what to do, but those don't stick because it doesn't match what you're doing in your life. It doesn't match where you are. You have to make these changes in a way that are sustainable for you and how you live versus how I live versus how you live, right? So it's just, I'm glad. I like your approach is what I'm saying. I love the approach of looking in and out because I think it's super important and not overwhelming somebody with, here's your protocol, take it and we're done. It's like not,
it doesn't work.
Doesn't work. And I will say, functional and integrative is newer, and functional. I love the concept of it, but there are times, and I've seen plenty of them because I'm one that hops around because I'm trying to find the one that resonates best with me. But sometimes, and a lot of clients that I have had referred to me from them come with like a very long list of things, but you cannot change things overnight. It has to be a slow process. And otherwise you're overwhelmed. You won't do it. It's not going to stick. And when you get to this point where you come and you're seeking things like this, you're frustrated to a point of, I need something different because it's not working, whatever I've been doing.
Yeah, for sure. Either things that you've just been trying on your own at home or other providers that you've been, doing what they're telling you to do and it's still not sticking because again, it goes back to these basic shifts, these basic lifestyle changes. And I have plenty of clients show up in my office and they've had supplement lists from the last 10 years, but no one's ever talked to them about stress and no one's ever tried to clean up their diet or explained why we need to take the seed oils out or tried to talk to them about the nervous system and how childhood trauma from 50 years ago may still be a problem for them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's so much deeper than just labs. It's so much deeper than just the gut. There's, again, it's that whole body, whole person approach. And for people who are listening, hopefully you're taking away little bits and little pieces, but what you can start doing today, tomorrow, and creating your, 1% shift for this week that could potentially become a non-negotiable for you is some of these lifestyle parts. Because in order to start to heal, you've got to kind of hit both ends of the spectrum, if you will. And so you have the power immediately to start some of these things. How much do you chew? How present are you when you eat? Is it an environment that is hostile when you're eating, or is it a lovely environment? There is such a thing as, we're, again, rush society, right? We're like, get your plate, get to the table, eat, go, everybody's like scattering. It's like, put on some music, light some candles, take some time to enjoy the company of whomever, or even if you're eating by yourself, enjoy that time in that space. Turn electronics off. I'm such a big advocate of, you can't eat your food and have something else really blowing through your mind at all times.
I need that space.
And then start to investigate your food, yeah, I love it. So love it. I think the message that I'm hearing over and over and over through this conversation, like the thread that's been woven is, you just have to take a step. You just have to try one thing on. The medical portion is there for you if this is something you're struggling with. I will drop everything in the show notes. And but there's also an accountability motivation level on our own side, right? Personally, that we have to start making decisions to start investigating what's happening around us, and how it serves us or doesn't serve us. So that's
Exactly.
kind of like what I'm hearing throughout. It's a lot of just finding what works for you, and having a better understanding. We have all the information we ever need at our fingertips, yet everybody's so confused and so overwhelmed with information. So I would say do your own investigation, ask yourself your own questions, and look up those answers. And again, just start wherever you are comfortable starting, not where somebody else tells you to start.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, because you definitely have blown my mind with a few of the things that you've talked about, and I appreciate it. I love podcasting for this very reason, because I'm meeting all kinds of different people that have different knowledge from different, experiences. So I love it. Before we end, I love to ask each person that comes on for a non-negotiable or two that you've created through your journey of becoming a better version of yourself to live like your healthiest life on a daily basis. Are there certain things that are not optional for you?
Yeah, so I think one is eating fruits or veggies with every meal, just to make sure I'm getting that in and feeding my gut bugs and keeping the good ones happy and trying to suppress the not so happy ones, because we all have some level of pathogenic
Hmm.
bacteria in the gut, totally
Yep.
normal and good, actually. And my second one, my family laughs at me, but I really try to keep plastics out of the house
Hmm.
and only serve in glasses. And I have a 2-year-old daughter, also an older son, but with my daughter from 6 months on, we taught her how to drink out of an open glass cup, and specifically
Aw,
glass, because we want her to be able to go out to a restaurant and not be served the styrofoam cup. And so we just got back from a trip, and every single time we sat down for a meal, they'd be rushing over with the plastic cup and would be sending it back. Thank you very much. But she can drink out of a glass, and the waiters are all lined up to watch her drink out of a glass cup. It's this big thing, but that's really non-negotiable for me is we don't do styrofoam, and I minimize plastic as much as possible. So
I love that. And again, the reason I love to ask this question is because the variety of answers and what has spoken to each different person is very fascinating to me, and I think for those listening who maybe don't have a ton of non-negotiables in place quite yet, it's fun to try on other people's, I think, and try it out and see how it feels and, learn. I mean, we're all here to support and learn from each other. And the more experiences and things, wisdom and things that we have tried, we can share, the better off we're going to be as a whole community trying to have that ripple effect for better, health and wellness.
love it.
So I love it. And I'm on board with you. We have very little plastic in our house. It's a little bit of a struggle, with a few of our family members, but for the most part, all glass containers, nothing hot, and those things are important. So if you're unaware, just because maybe it hasn't been something that has come to your radar yet, but plastics, they emit, different chemicals. And so if you leave something out in like water bottle out in the heat, that's leaching into your water. Same with food. If you have a plastic, whatever the frozen stuff sometimes comes in plastic or plastic Tupperware, and then you're heating it up or you're putting hot food into it to store it in the refrigerator, that is causing a leaching of BPA. And now you will see some companies have removed BPA, but don't think they haven't added something else in.
Yeah, I was
Just
going
a
to say the
little.
BPS doesn't look much better.
All right. I'm just going to warn you, they're going to take it out because, and I'll tell you, this is why I think is so cool though. We do have the power if we vote with our dollars.
Yes.
If people stop buying things that have BPA, which has been happening, and because it has come to the forefront for a lot of people, they listen, they hear that, because this, I mean, obviously something had to have been affected, their sales or whatever. So they've changed it because now they can say it's BPA free. And then people are like, oh, this is great. It's BPA free.
Yeah, they're
Read your
taking advantage of the
ingredients.
marketing. Yep.
Right. Read your ingredients, read your ingredients. And if you don't know what it says and you're not going to take the time to look it up, then it probably shouldn't be something to purchase because you just don't know. And that's taking
Exactly.
a gamble. Um,
Hmm.
in my opinion. So,
I agree.
but thank you so much again for coming on. This has been such a lovely conversation. And I know for sure I'm taking a lot away. So I know that my audience, my moms who are kind of stepping into this phase of taking care of themselves, so they can start to kind of unravel, and maybe their gut is part of their issues. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And I will drop all of Amy's information in the show notes so that if you want to get in touch with her, if you want to start following her and educating yourself, her Instagram's amazing. It's full of really great content, and really knowledgeable things that we can all learn a little bit each day if we were to actually watch. I think some social media is good in some respects. So this would be one channel I would say, tune into. So, but thank you so much, Amy, for coming on. And everybody who's listening, thank you for pouring into yourselves this week. And I will see you next week. That episode had so many great takeaways. I hope you feel inspired and more empowered to make small 1% shifts on your wellness journey this week. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. If you want to leave a review, share your thoughts, and let me know how you're going to be implementing these 1% shifts into your life. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with another mama who could use a little wellness love. Want to stay connected? Join me on Instagram and Facebook at Live Life Balanced with Robin. Check out my website at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com for more resources and grab yourself some freebies while you're there. Until next time, I hope you find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to come your way. See y'all next week. Love to y'all.